Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Strategic Policy and Resources Committee of Wednesday, the 27th of November 2019. Before we begin the business of the day, as some of you in the room may be aware, there is an election coming along next month, and I'd ask our Head of Legal Services, Lisa Simpson, to say a few words.
I don't think I need to remind you that we are in the pre-election period, so if people could just be mindful of what they say, how they say it, and their general conduct in the chamber today, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any substitutes? Councillor Barnacle?
Yes, substituting
Councillor McEwen? Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest on any of the business before us today? We do not. Move on to item 3, which is minutes, and the minute of the Espionage Committee of the 11th of September. I'm happy to move for approval. Agreed. Thank you.
Could I
yes.
Ask one question about the minutes? It's not about the minutes themselves. It is about the fact that there is not on the website, I know council officers are concerned about this, but a video or audio recording of that meeting. The same applied with the environment meeting earlier. There's been one or two other committee meetings where there is no video audio recording. Can I ask council officers, do they believe that that matter is now resolved? Because I think it's an important point.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. I am aware of the issue, and council officers have addressed the issue, but the Chief Executive might wish to say more. Or Mrs. Renton even, sorry.
We have been working very closely with the company who installed the system. There are, sort of some works that we would want to do probably, sort of in recess and leading up to and over the holiday period into January. But we also think that, that there is a requirement to do some additional training in terms of how the system works. So both of those things will take place early in the new year.
Thank you. I know you can't give every meeting 100% guarantee, but I am aware that you are concerned about this issue, and it does matter because these are it's a matter of public record and of audit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Donaldson. Moving on to go through the minutes. The minute of the meeting of the Property Subcommittee of the 19th of August for noting. The minute of the meeting of the Employees Joint Consultative Committee of the 30th of May for noting. The minute of the meeting of the Corporate Health, Safety and Wellbeing Consultative Committee of the 10th of June for noting. The minute of the meeting of the Tay Cities Region Joint Committee of the 21st of June for noting. The minute of the meeting of Perth Kinross Integration Joint Board of the 26th of June for noting.
Convener, I wanted to ask a question with regard to the minute of that meeting, yep. And that's with regard to paragraph 7.3 on page 25 of the pack. The Audit and Performance Committee update. At the bottom of that paragraph, there's a suggestion or request from our Chief Executive that items including the strategic risk, performance and health and safety appear as standing items in all future meetings of the IJB. That doesn't appear to have happened on subsequent minutes of the IJB meetings, and I wondered, it's not clear from the meeting whether that suggestion was adopted or not, or whether it's still working its way through the system. But I'd be concerned if these items, particularly suggested by our Chief Executive, have not been adopted by the IJB in the way they report.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have...
Yes, thank you. I can confirm that we are in discussion with the new chair of the IJB to ensure that the recommendations made by the Chief Executive are now addressed on the agenda moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, the minute of the meeting of the Perth Kinross Integration Joint Board, 27th September, for noting. The revenue budget, item 4, is 1920 Revenue Budget Monitoring Report number 2, and Mr Mackenzie will introduce for us, please.
Thank you, Convener, and good morning, Councillors. As set out in Section 2 and Appendices 1 and 2 to the report, there is a small projected net overspend on service budgets of £29,000. This represents an improvement on the position reported in September, mainly due to movements in the projected outturn for housing and environment services. The committee is requested to approve adjustments to the management budget for additional grant funding, for the latest projections on borrowing costs, noting the recent increase in PWLB rates, for movements in respect of the transformation programme, and to recognise £234,000 of additional income secured through a successful VAT reclaim. Further council tax income in the order of £200,000 is also anticipated in the current year from growth in the tax base and movements in the provisions. As noted in Section 3 and detailed in Appendix 4 to the report, the projected net overspend on the Perth Kinross Integration Joint Board budget is currently estimated at £3.3 million, of which £2.1 million relates to adult social care and will require to be met with the Council under the terms of the current integration scheme. The implementation of an in-year financial recovery plan was approved by the Integration Joint Board in September and is set out in Appendix 4. As a result, the projected overspend on adult social care is approximately £725,000 less than the position reported at the previous committee meeting. Expenditure on the housing revenue account remains projected to break even, although movements on the account are anticipated to reduce the revenue contribution to the Housing Capital Programme by a further £160,000. Overall, the net projected overspend in 2019-20 is currently estimated at approximately £1.9 million. While still in deficit, this represents an improvement of £1.5 million over the position reported to committee in September. The revenue budget will require to be closely monitored, particularly over the coming winter months when there is usually significant demand pressure on council services, and an update will be provided to the committee in January. Since preparing this report, the Scottish Government has advised of the formal suspension of the European Social Fund programme in Scotland, pending resolution of audit issues. ESF grant is used by the Council to fund employability pipeline and poverty and social inclusion programmes with partner third sector organisations. The Council's potential exposure in the current year, should this funding not be realised, is approximately £735,000. COSLA are in discussion with the Scottish Government over finding a resolution to this issue. Given the impact of suspending the programmes, it is proposed to continue funding this expenditure at risk while the matter is considered at a national level. The committee will be provided with an update on this issue in January. Happy to take questions, Convener.
Thank you very much, Mr Mackenzie. Are there any questions on the report? Councillor Parrott.
Thank you, Convener. I'm at page 44.2.2.4. There's a reference there to not reporting of grants of below £50,000. When you say not reported, does that mean that they won't be reported within the body of the text on papers, but will be included within the annexes to those papers? Thanks.
That's correct, Councillor Park. Thank you.
Councillor Donaldson. No questions?
Yes, I do. Page 44.
Anticipating.
As well. 2.3.4, because I think this is so important, and it's the announcement by the UK Treasury of a 1% increase in the Public Works Loan Board borrowing rates. Could I just ask the Head of Finance, and this is to clarify to members of Council and to the public, this is not a 1% increase in our kind of our overall interest costs, it's a full 1%, 100 basis point increase in the rate that's applied on new borrowing.
Thank you, Councillor Dawson, for your question. That's absolutely correct, yes.
Then just as a follow-up, because I think if I read it right, one of the reasons was it was raised was because the speculative binge by some councils elsewhere to use it to round trip to invest in commercial property and go, and that's not been the case with this council. Can I ask, with that increase, which I think came into immediate effect, this will apply to all forms of new borrowing with the Public Works Loan Board?
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Just to confirm for the committee, all new debt taken from the 9th of October of this year will be subject to that increase.
Okay, Councillor Hearn.
Thank you very much. My question's on the overspend by the Integrated Joint Board of 4.4 million. Can I just confirm if that's an overspend within the 12-month period or whether that includes any overspend from the previous years?
Thank you. The overspend relates to the in-year position, but there are in our financial plan and therefore in the budget that's been set, issues from the previous year and pressures from the previous year that have been required to be taken account in the current financial year. Namely, the overall kind of deficit that's been set does contain issues brought forward from the previous year.
And can I ask how much that is?
The roll forward structural deficit in relation to the social care services part of the Integration Joint Board is 2.3 million.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Convener. It's on a similar subject. Paragraph 3.5 refers to the financial recovery plan agreed in September, which was to be agreed by both the NHS and PKC chief executives. I wanted to know whether that agreement had been obtained, and also is the financial recovery plan likely to bring the budget in under the projected 2.03 million overspend that's contained in the report,
Okay,
and if so, by how much?
I'll ask the Chief Executive to respond to that one.
So Councillor Barrett, both the Chief Exec of the NHS and myself agreed the financial recovery plan. It is anticipated that the work that will be undertaken will reduce the projected overspend, but what I would not be able to provide to this committee is assurance that we'll get to a net balanced budget in the Health and Social Care Partnership, given the level of demand that we're experiencing.
Thanks very much for that. I wondered if we could have any expansion on what the key elements of the recovery plan contain.
Jane?
The financial recovery plan is a consolidated plan across health and social care services, and the social care aspect contains close review of all vacancies to identify those where they are not frontline services, and we can achieve some slippage to offset the overall financial position, but with significant risk assessment of all of those. So looking at staff costs and where staff costs can be managed without any impact on service delivery is a key aspect. Another key aspect is in relation to our intermediate care services, where we're working closely with health colleagues to look at other ways in which community services can meet the needs of our clients without the need for placements. So that's about joint working to meet the expectations and the requirements of our clients at a reduced cost.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Convener. Can I ask Stuart to elaborate on the comments he made at the start regarding the European money? Because I think I heard the words "at our risk," and I'm always a bit worried when I hear that. Can you elaborate on what the background is and what our risk actually is here?
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Essentially, the European Social Fund programme is managed centrally in Scotland by the Scottish Government. It's subject to audit by the Auditors of the European Commission. So there's been some issues around the audit process and verification of some of the expenditure. And that's not to suggest anything is untoward, it's just a technical audit process. There's two stages to that. There's a pre-suspension process and then there's a suspension process. And if issues aren't addressed, it automatically goes to suspension. So that's the position we're in at the moment. The European Commission have suspended the programme in Scotland pending resolution of these issues. And the Scottish Government and COSLA are working towards resolution of that. In terms of the issue being at risk, effectively, until the matter is addressed to the satisfaction of the European Commission, any expenditure incurred by the Council may be at risk of being irrecoverable. However, there's an expectation that these issues can be addressed fairly quickly.
And are you able to give us an idea of how much money is involved?
Just to clarify, the maximum exposure is around £735,000 in the current year.
Okay, Councillor Lane.
Thanks. It's to go back to the point that was made about the way we may redress the overspend in health and social care. I was concerned to see that one of the main strands was cutting staff, and don't see how, with the provision as it is at the moment across rural Perthshire, if we're going to be looking at one way of one of the main strands to redress the balance is to cut staff. Surely that must have an impact on the care that we're providing.
Jane.
I just would want to emphasise that this isn't about cutting staff. This is about short-term opportunity to delay recruitment to posts for posts that are absolutely not about frontline service delivery, with full risk assessment, ensuring that there's no impact on the care that we're providing. So, but it is a post-by-post review to see what opportunities there are for short-term in-year benefit. In terms of addressing the financial position moving forward, along with colleagues in other business units of Perth Kinross Council, we are looking at the longer-term transformational change that can reduce costs. But the financial recovery plan is about the very short-term opportunities that don't impact on frontline services.
Okay, Councillor Barrett.
Thanks for the supplementary, Convener. Have we been alerted to any significant concerns from our third sector partners about their financial viability, given the freeze on payments from the ESF? Nationally, there are now beginning to be rumours of some charities going to the wall because of the monies that have been frozen, and I'd be concerned if there was an issue in Perth and Kinross that was going to affect supports to vulnerable members of the community provided by the third and voluntary sector here.
Thank you for your question. I'm aware of your concerns, but I'll ask Mr Mackenzie to answer.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Councillor Parrott. Sorry, Councillor Parrott, my apologies, no, Councillor Barrett.
It's a B.
Sorry. Sorry, Peter. I'm afraid I can't comment on the viability of third sector organisations. I'm not familiar with their own financial position. What I can assure the committee of is that we would intend to make good on our funding commitments to these organisations in terms of the programmes covered by the European Social Fund programme, and hopefully that will provide them with a degree of reassurance. The other thing I would add, when I talked about audit issues, and just for clarification, there is no suggestion of any issues in the way that the schemes are being administered in Perth and Kinross.
Okay, yeah, just to clarify that our maximum exposure, my understanding, is 735,000, but we are carrying that risk for the time being. Councillor Hearn.
Thank you very much. I just want to continue from my previous question with the 2.3 million overspend from 2018-19. Under the risk-sharing agreement, should that not have been resolved at the end of 18-19 and not carried forward to this year? Or am I getting that wrong?
The risk-sharing agreement actually is set out that it would be to the Council's detriment, so we are actually absorbing our share in terms of that carry forward.
I understand that. I just wondered, should it have been resolved at the end of 2018-19 and not carried forward to this financial year?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's the pressures that are carried forward.
Thanks. It was another point, actually. The question was, I noticed that there's a 407,000 underspend on page 53 in the budget for young people with complex behavioural issues, which includes the number of pupils placed within residential schools. Is this solely down to lack of demand?
Councillor Lang, what we're seeing is that we're able to keep more children in local placements, whether that's kinship, foster care, or within an enhanced provision within a mainstream setting. And so, yes, it does relate to lack of demand.
Latest revenue monitoring report. At this time, we are still projecting an overspend, but I welcome the fact that the position has reduced by over 1.5 million. This improvement is mainly as a consequence of measures undertaken in the housing and environment and health and social care, as well as additional council tax income. I look forward to receiving further updates as the year progresses. Finally, I would like to draw members' attention to the most welcome £117,000 in the North Inch Golf Course that is highlighted in this report. This is a result of the work of officers from Housing and Environment and Corporate and Democratic Services over several years, and I am sure that the committee will join me in welcoming them in the fruits of their efforts. So I'm happy to move the paper. Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Convener. As you say, the monitoring report provides a comprehensive picture of the current status of the revenue budget. It contains many examples of good practice where costs have been reduced or efficiency savings met. I think of particular note is the £190,000 saving as a result of better loan charge arrangements, the £290,000 saving as a consequence of the rollout of the LED lighting and energy consumption reduction measures, and the return of VAT as mentioned. These positive outcomes have been overshadowed by the continuing overspend on health and social care, of which the Council is responsible for over £2 million. The magnitude of this situation is apparent when compared to the Council's overall overspend of £1.875 million, but we welcome the further assurances in respect of the financial recovery plan. Convener, I'm grateful to the Head of Finance and the Chief Accountant and their team for this very full and helpful update on the revenue budget position, and I'm pleased to second the report.
Okay, thank you. Can we agree the report? Okay, thank you. Move on to paper 5, which is the Composite Capital Budget 1920, Housing Investment Programme 1924, and the Monitoring Report number 2. And again, I'd ask Mr Mackenzie to introduce.
Thank you. Thank you, Convener. The gross budget for the 10-year composite programme is currently estimated at £632.3 million. Section 3 summarises progress to date with the composite programme. Net expenditure to the 31st of October is approximately £19.1 million, or 35% of budget, an improvement on the equivalent position last year. There are several proposed adjustments to service capital budgets for the profiling of expenditure on early learning and childcare and the school estate, for works to Old Perth and Queen's Bridges, and for a review of the Fleet Vehicle Replacement Programme, amongst others. These adjustments are set out in Appendices 1 and 2 to the report. The current projected outturn for the composite programme in 2019-20 is £54.2 million, or 87% of the capital budget approved by Council in February. Section 4 summarises progress to date with the Housing Investment Programme. The budget for the 5-year housing programme is currently estimated at £69.5 million. The net expenditure to the 31st of October on the programme is approximately £88.3 million, or 59% of budget, again in advance of the equivalent position last year. There are proposed adjustments to the housing programme for new build schemes at Glebe Schoon and Hunting Tower, for the receipt of additional grant funding for the Council House buyback scheme, and for works to multi-storey flats pending consultation with residents. The current projected outturn for the Housing Investment Programme is £14 million, which is in line with the budget approved by the Housing and Communities Committee in January. Happy to take questions. Convener.
Thank you very much, Mr Mackenzie. Have we any questions? Councillor Barrett. You've got me now. Excuse me.
As long as you know who to vote for, convener.
Apologies.
Now, I wanted to ask a question with regard to paragraphs 4.5 and 4.6 and the pushing back of the monies for the multi-storey flats. And I'm concerned that we have been kind of pushing this back regularly for a number of years. So I'd like some reassurance that the 2021 timetable will actually be firm, and it does allow significant and allow adequate time for consultation with the residents over the external works to places like Potter Hill Flats, which have for a long time been subject to outstanding repairs, things like the Georgian wire glass on the walkways, the rusting frames even for the wire glass on the walkways and the balconies, and the constant problem of peeling paint on the roofs of the walkways. So I'm really quite anxious to see that we do progress that. I would like some reassurance on that.
Thank you for your question. Mrs. Renton.
Councillor Barrett, the structural investigation works for the multi-storey flats have now been carried out to all blocks with positive results from all of the surveys. We've now appointed a quantity surveyor and architect, or we are appointing a quantity surveyor and architect to cost the options and works identified, so that we can then carry out the extensive consultation ahead of any works being carried out to the properties. So that's why it's been pushed back to 2021, but we would feel very confident that will now take place, given the complexities around the multi-tenancy and owner-occupier issues that we have in the blocks as well.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Lane.
Thanks, convener. Unfortunately, with problems with my Surface Pro, I've been trying to read through the appendices, which are quite small. So I can't find my favourite topic of Blairgowrie Recreation Centre. I'm sure it's in there. I was just wondering if somebody could tell me where it is, and on what page, and also if it's been pushed back again, and where we are with it.
Thank you. Yep.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Lane. Regarding the Blairgowrie Recreational Centre, the previous commitment was we were looking for a completion date of March 23, and also we aim to have the user reference group before the end of the calendar year. Unfortunately, now it's going to have to be into the new year. As part of taking the project forward, we still don't have a workable design due to basically the climate change and looking at all the technical standards in the progress regarding that. So unfortunately, the user reference group won't happen until the new year. There'll be communication going out in the next couple of days just to inform all the relevant stakeholders.
If you would bear with me for a moment or two, Chief Executive would like to say a word.
Thank you. So, Greg, just to be crystal clear about this matter, what we're saying is the user group has been delayed in being set up, but you're not anticipating a delay to the completion of Blairgowrie Rec as per the approval to March 2023 at the previous committee.
Yes, I can confirm that, Chief Executive.
Councillor Lane.
Thanks for the answer, and I hope our confidence is realised, as this project was initially started in 2016, and it's gone through various iterations, and we're now looking at 2023. Completion date?
Yeah, that's indicative completion date, March 23, yes.
Okay, I hope I'm still, well, hopefully I'll still be around here maybe to see it.
Councillor McEwen.
Thank you, Convener. Appendix 3, page 90 of the report, there's funding allocated for triple glazing and for energy efficiencies. But I obviously notice on the spreadsheets that that funding doesn't go all the way through. The triple glazing finishes in 1920 and the energy efficiencies in 21-22. Is that because we have finished doing those activities, or that is more money needed to be applied to finish the works?
I don't have that level of detail, but Mrs. Renton will maybe be able to.
At that level of detail, I'm not quite sure about. However, the triple glazing, a process will be based on, need and identified need. you know, sort of, and if we'd require to do further works, then we would just reprogram other bits of the capital works to be able to undertake that. And as you're aware, you know, sort of we continue to look at making our properties as energy efficiency as possible. We're currently within the agreed ratings that we need to be for all our properties, and we'll carry on doing works as and when we need to.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any further questions? No, thank you very much. Sorry. Over £700 million of investment in the next 10 years in our ambitious capital budget. The investment will improve and enhance our schools, our roads, our bridges, our buildings, and the varied infrastructure across the entire council area that our citizens rely on. In achieving this, I would like to place on record my thanks to the officers across the council for their sterling efforts to ensure delivery of this administration's capital programme. The Head of Finance has provided detailed commentary on the contents of the report earlier. Finally, I would like to draw members' attention to the recent opening of the Creative Exchange with the first tenants already in place. This is a hugely important part of our cultural offering, and I look forward to future updates. Happy to move the paper. Councillor Duff.
Happy to formally second, Convener.
Thank you. Agree the paper. Comments? Councillor Donaldson.
Just very briefly, because I don't think we can take the capital budget in isolation from the revenue budget and vice versa. I do want to thank the work the finance team have done. I think they have a particularly challenging position over the next few months. I mentioned earlier on Public Works Loan Board, I note that they're going to come back to full council on the 18th of December. And we also have a budget briefing session on the 16th, which is going to take quite a while, I think. But certainly one of the things I'd like to know is, with that, I don't want to preempt things, and that is, are they going to look towards more commercial, non-public sector sources of finance? I think that might be certainly something worth considering. I think the other thing we've got to know is there are no members of Parliament at present. I'm not making a party political point. There just simply are no MPs at the moment. There is no UK budget. That in turn makes it difficult for a Scottish budget. And I think the one thing we're going to have to know, like the other 32 other, all 32 local authorities in Scotland, is the timetable in terms of setting council tax, because simply as far as I understand, council tax bills do have to go out in early March, so we're going to be working on an immensely concentrated timetable. As I say, it's just an observation.
No, thank you for the observation. I'm aware of the point. I have discussed the same matter with members of the Scottish Government, with fellow council leaders and with COSLA. And as soon as we have information on the projected diary for this council tax, the various budget setting processes, we will relay that to everybody. Okay.
Thank you for that.
So I was just going to add a couple of points, Convener. Thank you, because Lawson, thanks for the question. First, if I can take you back to your comments on PWLB borrowing rates. We are in discussion with other potential lenders. As you'd imagine, the market's been quick to respond to the increasing rates in terms of coming forward with some products. So those are under consideration. In terms, just to reinforce what the convener said, in terms of the overall budget, timetable and landscape, that's uncertain at the moment, and discussions are ongoing with COSLA and between COSLA and the Scottish Government. One potential scenario may be that we have to, at the moment the legislation requires us to set the council tax by the 11th of March, and we may have to set a council tax in advance of consideration of the full budget based on our funding position. That would be at the extreme end of the potential course of events, but that's currently under discussion at a national level, as you'd imagine.
Again, thank you, and I think we can appreciate the complexities.
Just on that point then, does the financial year still run from April till March, even although we haven't set the budget, say we didn't set the budget till the middle of April?
Thank you, Councillor Lane. The financial year would run from April to March. We'd seek to set the budget before the end of the current financial year, but that would depend on the level of information available to us, given the significance of our grant funding to our overall position. But as I say, those discussions are ongoing. What I would anticipate is a more compressed budget timetable than we've maybe experienced before.
Okay, thank you. If there are no other comments, can we agree the paper? Thank you. Move on to paper 6, Community Investment Fund.
Sorry.
Sorry.
I've been remiss. I should have declared an interest in this paper as a Vice Chair of the Blackgown Matry Time Bank.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other? No. We have Deputy Chief Executive, Mr. Valentine, to introduce, or Fiona Robertson, in fact. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Councillors, can you hear me? Great. Councillors, this support summarises the recommendations for funding from the first round of the second year of the Community Investment Fund. You may remember that you approved the process for this in April this year, following an evaluation that we did of year 1. The report sets out recommendations for each ward, which have been reviewed by the local action partnerships in 11 of the 12 multi-member wards, and the recommendations for each ward are in section 2 of the report. Just to note that Kinross ward has decided to defer decisions on applications until round 2. So you're asked to note that we've got recommendations for you to consider this morning which total around £330,000 if they're all approved. There was a small carry forward from last year of around £20,000 across all wards and local action partnerships in total. And assuming that all these applications are approved today, that will leave around £293,000 for the second tranche of applications, which is currently open, and the closing date is the 15th of January next year. As I've said before, councillors, your support and help in promoting the fund, which I think we've seen from a year and a half already, is delivering some fantastic benefits at grassroots level right across Perth and Kinross, and your help and support in promoting the fund and the opportunities that it offers is really welcome. So that's the report, that's what you're asked to do, and both I and Lee Haxton, who's sitting at the back and administers the fund as part of the community services team's responsibilities, happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Councillor Parrott.
Thank you very much, Convener. Whilst I welcome this report, my first question is it the administration's intention to carry on the CIF into the next financial and future financial years? And one aspect that I would have expected to see reported, and would ask if it can be reported, is what has been the total demand on the CIF from within the different wards? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. In response to the first part of your question, we get the opportunity to decide what we're going to do with the Community Investment Fund at the forthcoming budget review, and depending upon the pressures put upon us by others, we will determine that at that time, and everyone will have the opportunity to put in their own bids. For the second part of the question, I'll ask Fiona Robertson to respond.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Parrott. I think the short answer is it varies. There is high demand for the fund, but not unsustainable demand, and that's probably evidenced by the fact we had a small carry forward last year. Worth, I think, also reminding ourselves that this fund operates alongside a number of other funds, either administered by the council or other funding bodies. So what we've tried to do with this one is to really focus applicants on how grassroots projects can tackle stubborn inequalities, whatever they may be, within their communities. We have done some, and this is just hot off the press, so we will circulate it to committee members after this meeting, but we have done some analysis of the applications that have come in so far and the sorts of projects or the sorts of issues, I should say, that applicants are asking for support with. And that, just gives us a little bit more understanding about not just the overall level of demand, but the kind of demand. So quite a high number of applications, just under a quarter, projects to tackle social isolation and loneliness, which perhaps reflects the large rural communities that Perth and Kinross has within its bounds. Quite a high number of projects, around 16% year to date, for children and young people and opportunities for them, and quite a high number which are themselves around building capacity and skills in communities themselves. And as I say, Councillor Pallett, I'll circulate this analysis to committee members after this meeting, and happy to talk offline about the demand issue.
Supplementary?
If I may, thank you for that response, but I'm afraid it didn't get to the nub of what I'm driving at, and that is, will you make public a ward-by-ward breakdown of what has been the demand on the CIF? Thank you.
Apologies, Councillor Pallett. There's no difficulty with that, so we can, in fact, it's being handed to me as we speak. So we will circulate to the committee how many applications we've had, as opposed to how many have been approved or gone forward. Remember also that the team are in quite regular dialogue with potential applicants, so sometimes application proposals will come to us and we'll give some initial feedback about how that application could be strengthened. So there's always a number which are in play, as it were.
Yeah, just in response to that, I'm slightly uncomfortable about divulging all the information from all the applicants, because there are applicants there who I'm aware of have been unsuccessful, who have reapplied and been successful, and they may feel that if we disclose all their information from an initial bid, that it may prejudice their future bid. So I'd just be cautious on that note.
I think we would only disclose numbers, overall numbers, for that reason.
If you'll indulge me, I'm not asking for the nature of the bidders to be making public. What I'm asking for is the totals that have been bid for in each ward to be made public in the same way as these papers are public.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Convener. I have a couple of brief questions. One's very similar to Councillor Parrott's, and I wonder if perhaps our future report we could be given the amount of money that each group bids for as opposed to what they get, because I know that some groups have bid for more and the ward panel decided to give them less. Is there a reason we don't do that, and could we do that in the future?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. Yes, of course we can do that. I think we've just tried to strike a balance of keeping the report as brief as possible whilst giving you the information that you need, but there's no difficulty providing that.
Can I use
supplementary?
Well, it's more of a second question, is that okay? Fiona, what's your thoughts on how we get more people to become involved on ward panels to make the decision? Because I'm very conscious in my ward that that's proved to be quite difficult, and I hear from anecdotally from others that that's not unusual, it's the case across the area. What can we do you think, to encourage more people to take more of an active interest in those decisions?
Thank you for the question. It's a really good question, and Lee may want to add to what I'll say. I don't think there is a straightforward answer to that. One of the things we always have to be mindful of is that people in communities have got a lot of things to do. It's quite a significant responsibility, evaluating applications, and we recognise that. Some people are more comfortable with it than others. There are a suite of things that we are doing in terms of building up skills, knowledge and experience at the local action partnership level. So there are a number of training and development opportunities that we've offered and will continue to offer as the local action partnerships evolve. And one of those, I think, probably needs to be this focus on how do you operate as part of an evaluation panel for small grants within the broader context, I guess, of devolved financial responsibilities to communities and how they work effectively from everyone's point of view. So there isn't a straightforward answer to that, but it is something that we're aware of. As I've said before, there is also, I think, a role for councillors in promoting and supporting the role of the Community Investment Fund and the role of local action partnerships in understanding what projects are coming up at grassroots level and what communities and individuals need to enable them to deliver those projects. Lee,
Okay,
do you want to add?
First thing would be, as Fiona mentioned, the deadline for the next round of the SIF funding is the 15th of January, which was a revision. Previously it was going to be this month. So we did circulate an amended timescale for the next round of SIF. So members will now know when the applications close and when the decision needs to be taken by committee. So you have then a timescale now to maybe try and plan ahead to have your ward panel meeting within that time period. The other thing is maybe something that we can take forward as a team would be to put together a very simple and short summary of the role of the ward panel in relation to the Community Investment Fund, and that can be circulated to all members, potentially as a useful tool to try and recruit additional members for your ward panels.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councillor McEwen. Thank you, Convener. In point 3.1 under conclusions recommendations, it describes the SIF funding as for new projects and initiatives which deliver against identified quality issues outlined in local action plans. But the report we have built before us actually doesn't indicate what actual points each project is actually going to try to meet. And I think that's information that would be good to have in the report so that we can see for the individual projects what actual quality issues the individual projects are trying to achieve. Is that something that we can do going forward?
Thank you for the question, Councillor McEwen. I think we do need to be mindful that the grant panels scrutinise the applications in detail, and they are given guidance by the team on where projects applications do or don't demonstrate how they will deliver the priorities that are set out in local action plans. And the local action partnership, when it then reviews the recommendations from the panels overall, also asks that question. So I think there is something here about achieving a balance of allowing the grant panels and the local action partnerships to do their job in scrutinising applications and making sure that what's proposed does align with local action plan priorities, and the role of this committee in accepting the assurance that that work has been done, albeit that as the committee with responsibility for approving these applications, ultimately you of course have the right to probe and challenge any of the applications that are in front of you.
Supplementary. I think what we've currently got in front of us is actually quite a closed lack of information system. You know, the media and the projects that don't happen in my ward, I've no idea what equality issues those are going to meet. And our committee would get quite long if I started asking questions on all the different projects that don't recognise, don't have understanding of. And I think everything we do in this council is always related to an action, part of our governance and part of our aims as a council. Everything we do is aligned to that and following the public pound. And I think that just a simple definition of what equality issues that a project is meant to aim for and trying to achieve is just making the process open and transparent. I think what we're trying to achieve is community empowerment. And if we become too prescriptive, we will fail to deliver the Scottish Government's agenda as far as community empowerment is concerned. But I take your points on board, and I'll maybe ask the team to review them going forward. Councillor Lane.
Most of the questions have been answered, so I'll save it to comments.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Barrett.
Thanks, Convener. Sorry, mine was actually a comment as well, so I'll save it for comments too.
Questions? Councillor Donaldson.
The one thing that really does stand out is 11 out of the 12 action partnerships have gone for 2 tranches of funding. but one, and it's not a criticism of Kinross Shire councillors, but they have gone for only one tranche. Does this mean, is there specific reasons why that applies with Kinross Shire, or does this mean going forward for local action partnerships, we do have the ability to say we either do it in one amount or will it have to be two?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Donaldson. This is the first time that's happened in this year. Does it indicate that it's a challenge to manage two tranches? Not necessarily. The process, and this perhaps relates to Councillor McEwen's question as well, the process that we carried out in year one, including the question of whether it would be more sensible to have just one round of funding or two, is something that we considered when we evaluated year one and when we recommended this year's process to this committee in April this year. So if your question is, does that indicate that there might be a problem with how the scheme is operating, I'm not sure that it necessarily does, but I might be misunderstanding your question.
Can I just follow up? It's just a very simple question that Kinross Shire have decided and they've been allowed to go for just one tranche. Does it mean that going forward, if the Community Investment Fund remains in its present form, that individual local action partnerships can decide between either going for two tranches or for one?
Yes, apologies, I misunderstood your question. It does mean that, and it has meant that in the past, and there have been occasions in the past when that's happened. So the purpose of the scheme is to be as flexible as possible, Councillor Donaldson, in terms of how local action partnerships manage the tranches of funding whilst maintaining some consistency across areas as a whole where we can.
The reason is because we certainly were given a very clear steer that it really had to be, in effect, two rounds of financing, but we now have a greater flexibility that it can be just done in one round.
This second year of the Community Investment Fund builds on the very successful first year, and some really positive feedback and some excellent projects have been delivered. You're asked to consider and approve the recommendations from each of the individual ward panels, which have involved a number of you and a variety of community representatives. I would like to thank all those involved in the ward panels and the local action partnerships for giving up their time to ensure that these local budgets are used to support important local priorities and projects and across the whole of Perth and Kinross. This is a great example of community empowerment in action, and I'm happy to move the report.
Thank you, Convener. The Community Investment Fund has proved to be a very popular initiative, and if the latest batch is approved, over £900,000 will have been distributed to almost 170 different projects aimed at the reduction of the type of inequalities that we've heard about this morning across Perth and Kinross. With almost £300,000 of further funding still to be distributed through our local action partnerships, the Community Investment Fund will continue to support more of these important local projects across our local authority area. I'm therefore delighted to second the report and thank the Community Planning and Policy team for their support to action partnerships and the funding panels. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any comments? Councillor Lane first.
Thank you, Convener. I welcome this report, and while I had some concerns along with Councillor McEwen reading through the groups that have applied there, we've got to trust the local action partnerships that they will know what's happening in their ward. We will never know what's happening in everybody else's ward, so I'm reassured by the fact that local members are helping decide along with local groups what it should be. I think reading through the list and not understanding them all, I do think this is the batch that have come forward this time. I can understand more projects that are going to help stubborn inequalities and social isolation than what came forward last year. And I think I hope this continues, and I hope that we can show that we're able to achieve what the aims of the investment fund are. So I welcome the report, and I'd be quite happy to, obviously we're very happy to support all the applications that are in.
Thank you very much. Councillor McCall. Sheila McCall. No. Ross McCall.
Many names.
Sorry.
Sorry. No, I'm very basically along the same lines. I just wanted to reiterate that, first of all, I think the report's excellent. I think the work that's been done is excellent. I think it's important to remember that ward panels are not just made up of councillors, they are made up of community groups and representatives from community groups. And that local focus on these applications coming forward is having an effect in local areas, and that they're meeting the inequalities that are coming forward in those local areas. And as a committee, I think we must ensure moving forward that any decision process does stay local and doesn't become too centralised towards this council committee. It is important that the local areas have their say, and that we really are rubber stamping what the local areas want to move forward. So thank you very much indeed for the report.
Thank you. Councillor Parrott.
Thank you very much, Convener. I welcome the benefits brought by the CIF, and I recognise that life isn't always completely fair. However, given the intent of the CIF, it has always concerned me that Perth city wards, with approximately a third of the population of the authority and some of the, or a concentration of disadvantage, only actually get a quarter of the money from this. And I ask, if this is carried forward, can that situation be looked at? Thank you.
We can look at distribution going forward, and I suspect that would be up to any future budget setting operation. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Convener. I think it's really good that you can see a much sort of stronger emphasis on tackling inequalities through the successful bids that have been included in this round of the CIF funding. I think we really have to be careful. We have now spent longer scrutinising how communities spend £600,000 than we did on our £600 million capital budget. So I think members need to be conscious of the amounts of money that we're talking about here and what the intent of that money is. And if you devolve power and resources to communities, you devolve power and resources to communities, and you don't then try and second guess everything that they're doing in a committee such as this. So I'd like to give a commitment that the Liberal Democrat budget will include CIF 2. Whether that is of the same size as CIF 1, we'll need to wait and see, depending on resources. But the direction of travel is one that we have to follow, and I think that it needs to be modified. We need not to have reports come into SPNR for approval. That has got to go. We can have reports come into SPNR for noting how they're spent. The local action partnerships appear in rotation in front of the community planning partnership to explain how they're tackling persistent local inequalities. And I think we need to remember that there's that level of scrutiny as well. We need to remember that there are local members involved in their local action partnerships and on the decision-making panels. So I think we've got to seriously and emphatically devolve power and resources to the community and keep our sticky fingers off that once we do that.
Thank you. Any further comments? Okay, just to finally say, I am an absolute advocate of community empowerment, and I think this is a great example of it. Can we agree to paper? Thank you. Paper 7 this morning, which is the transformation programme, and Mr. Valentine to introduce.
Thank you, Convener. This report gives an update on Phase 4 of the transformation programme, with reports on the 12 projects as at the end of October 2019. It gives an overview of the progress to date and a brief explanation of the project status. The projects are managed by project boards, which report as appropriate any exceptions to the project plan, which covers the identified milestones, risks, issues, costs and expected savings. The Strategic Investment and Improvement Board then receives updates as appropriate. I would like to highlight an error within paragraph 217.2 of the paper, which should read, that we will extend mobile working solutions to a further 100 staff, not 300 staff. That's the total of the next 3 months. I'm happy to take any questions on the report.
Okay. Any questions? Sorry, any questions on the report? Councillor Sheila McCall, wide awake.
Thank you, Convener. My questions, well, I have 2 or 3 questions, but I'll start with the first one, is around the online services My Account review on page 110. I think it's encouraging that there is a move towards online access to services, but it's an issue I've raised at other committee meetings. There are a number of residents who live in Perth Kinross that may not necessarily have ease of access to internet connections and therefore access to the services online. There are also some of our residents who for one reason or another are unable to use online services and indeed telephone services, particularly people with any sort of learning disability or physical impairment. And so I'm just wondering where the consideration of those requirements from our citizens across Perth and Kinross are being considered as part of this transformation project.
Thank you, Councillor McCall. As part of the review, we have looked at the way that people access, just as you say, the different forms, different channels that people use. And we're looking at all these channels. We're not just looking at digital. We realise that some people will not be able to access digitally, and it will need to allow for them being able to still contact the council. So the review team are looking at all of that. It's not just about digital for everyone. We appreciate that part of the wider picture is that we look at how everybody accesses the council going forward.
Do you have a supplementary? Yeah.
It's not a supplementary, it's just another question. It's really around the telematics in terms of the fleet efficiency. I have asked again on previous committee meetings and reports what were the savings that were realised from telematics, and I was told the last time that they hadn't been calculated yet because the service was still being rolled out. So now that it's fully complete, I would be interested in knowing what actual savings we have been able to identify, quantify and contribute to the bottom line from the telematics introduction.
Thank you. Fraser.
Thanks for the question. Yes. At the moment, projected savings of £185,000 recurring. The project had a target of £150,000 recurring, so at this stage we're actually in excess of that.
Thank you. Final question. Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Convener. 2.5.2 is the idea of bringing some public sectors together in Blairgowrie, and I see we're needing to have a high-level strategic feasibility study, and I wonder if there's any progress on when that's going to happen, when it will be concluded.
It'll be early part of next year, Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Convener. Paragraph 2.2 refers to the review of catering services and says that it will no longer be reported as part of the transformation process. I'm concerned as to how it will be reported. Clearly, we have to have a future catering and meal service for schools in early years that is going to be fit for service, but it just seems that we've kind of airbrushed that out of this committee's remit, and we've also had no mention of the financial impacts and unmet savings that the decision of the Council in September had on our budget. So the school meal service doesn't appear in our budget monitoring. It's no longer going to appear in our transformation programme. How can we be certain that we're going to have a meal service that will be fit for purpose into the future?
Okay, it certainly will have to be noted somewhere. As you are aware, Council decided in September that we would not go with the central production unit in Dundee, and that we would continue, but we also have a £500,000 pressure to resolve going forward. But I'm not sure which actual committee it will come to. Mrs. Devlin.
Councillor Barrett, the agreement at full council was that the modernising officer working group would provide strategic direction to an operational working group to take forward this work, and that the work on the school meal service in Perth Kinross would be reported back through full council. That was the agreement in the September council, and that's what we're working to. So it's not that it won't be reported anywhere. The progress on that work will in fact be reported at full council.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further questions? No, thank you. Councillor Lane, sorry.
Thanks. It's just 2.9, commercialisation of assets and income generation, which has been a long-running sore and has never seemed to have flown. I was just wondering when we will actually, now it's out, it's gone through a few iterations, I think. Could somebody just give me the background of the last couple of years, where we are and where we're actually going with this now?
Mr. Valentine.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Yeah, as it says in the paper, it has taken a while to get here, but we're out to tender just now, and we're anticipating that we will award that tender in December 2019.
Did we not award a tender to somebody else a year ago or 2 years ago?
We awarded a tender on specific aspects of commercialisation. Those aspects did not generate what we thought they were going to generate. So this is revisiting the work stream to see what we can get out of it.
Thanks. And is this, it's a supplement, will this be a more overreaching look at different ways and using buildings as well as, I think it was roundabouts before, but all our assets to commercialise them?
I can maybe answer that for Mr. Valentine. Just to be clear to all members, that I have instructed officers to bring forward a commercialisation strategy for this council, and that will be reported to this committee. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? No, thank you. The committee is asked to note the progress in relation to the projects monitored within our transformation programme 2015-20. This paper details the continued work to complete the projects and realise the outcomes originally set out. I'm happy to move the paper. Councillor Duff.
Happy to second, Convener.
Councillor Forbes.
Just a quick comment, Convener, going back to the thing I talked about earlier in Blairgowrie. I think this is the future of public service, and I'm pleased to see that we're working in that direction, and I think we should be looking at what's happening in the Blairgowrie police station, and hopefully it'll be successful, and hopefully we'll carry it forward, and hopefully all public sectors can save some money by working more closely together.
Thank you. Councillor McEwen.
Directly on that point, council officers have been working with the ward councillors on that exact same thing, and with the Blairgowrie Development Trust, and it's moving into offices in Leslie Street as well. So that's all been done, and all be done with the ward councillors' support.
Thank you. Okay, move on to paper 8, which is the Commercial Property Investment Programme. And Mr. Valentine to introduce.
Thank you, Convener. This report provides an update on the Council's Commercial Property Investment Programme. Since 2014, the programme has used an initial budget allocation and receipts from sales of commercial properties to invest in new commercial land and properties attracting businesses and jobs. North Muirton Industrial Estate, including the Perth Food and Drink Park, and Kinross Industrial Estate are both good examples of what has been achieved. The intention to expand the North Muirton Industrial Area and the desire to construct a demonstration building for small to medium-sized businesses are also outlined in the report. The Employment Land and Commercial Property Development Board, which monitors the programme, has identified the need for a greater degree of operational flexibility. The committee is asked to consider a series of criteria which would be used by the board to prioritise Council's interventions to develop employment land. Council's interventions through the programme are site acquisition, site servicing and property development. I'm happy to take any questions on the paper.
Thank you, Mr. Valentine. Questions? Councillor Ahern.
Thank you very much. My question is regarding land at North Muirton and paragraph 2.4. When the concept of the food and drink park was first thought out, I was the chair of the Community Council in North Newton, and we raised concerns about access for large vehicles gaining access to that area. We asked whether there could be a new access road, so they didn't have to access the Arran Road estate at the same place, which is the junction of Butte Drive and Dunkeld Road. And we were told that because of the proximity to the rail line, that it was impossible to put another road in. But I now see that there's a new access road going to be built at a cost of 400,000, and I just wonder how we're now managing to put in a new access road when we were told that the rail line actually prohibited that.
Mr. Valentine.
Thank you, Councillor Ahern. This is about an access road into the site. It's not about a different access road. So this is just about opening up the site.
Are we talking about a road on the site and not
Yes.
access to it?
Yes.
Right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Peter Barrett.
Thanks. The report makes reference to the potential expiry of the fund, and I wondered whether there was any potential in the future for actual income generation to the fund from some of the sites that are developed, either by retaining a share of those sites or commanding some sort of rent from them, Jim.
I think the whole purpose of our commercialisation strategy is to evaluate these opportunities. Okay. Councillor Parrott.
Thank you, Convener. I'm very interested in the project that's mentioned on page 123 at point 2.6. Can someone say a little bit more about that demonstrator building? Thank you.
I'll ask Serge Marone if he can say a bit more about the detail, Councillor Parrott.
Sorry, say again?
I'll ask Serge
Thanks.
Marone if he can say a bit more about the detail.
Yes, thank you for the question, Councillor Parrott. This project is effectively trying to be a leading project in Scotland, so that's why we are working with Zero Scotland and Scottish Enterprise to develop another way of effectively building industrial properties in Scotland. This is not what the market will do, because this is obviously a bit more costly, but taking into account the climate change emergency, the necessity to obviously to take a building into the long life of the building, we try obviously to develop some processes to build industrial property in different way, which will take into account all of these requirements. So this is what the portal project is effectively to try to develop a template for industrial properties development in Scotland and potentially across the UK.
Mandry.
If I may, has a site been identified for this project, or will that depend on the nature of the ongoing use of the building?
We are looking at 3 sites just now, and depending on, as you say, depending on the building, we will decide on one of those 3 sites.
Okay, Councillor Lane.
Thanks, Convener. It's to go back to Councillor Barrett's question, which I thought was a very valid one, and I would like it expanded on the answer to his question, where he asked if I understand or paraphrase it, that we would retain some of the buildings and rent them out, so we had an ongoing income rather than just be selling everything off. And maybe I've not paraphrased his question correctly, but that's what I understood he asked, and I didn't get that from the answer.
The answer was yes, and that was part of my answer, but I'll ask Mr. Valentine to be more explicit.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor Lane. Yes, what we're looking at just now are a variety of opportunities to work with companies or work in joint ventures to look at how we get income in differently. So we don't have any specific examples as yet that we can talk about, but we're certainly exploring all the options, and that would include building and then leasing back.
Thanks.
Thank you. Supporting business growth and higher value job creation is one of the top priorities of this Council. Council's interventions to develop land and commercial infrastructure through Commercial Property Investment Programme are continuing to achieve this priority. In a fast and changing environment, we need to be more agile and be able to respond to the opportunities at pace. And we need fit-for-purpose processes. This paper is being considered today to put in place such fit-for-purpose processes. The report's recommendation is to agree the proposed criteria and the programme structure. I'm happy to move the paper. Councillor Duff.
Happy to second, Convener.
Okay. Any comments? No. Thank you. Move on to the final paper today, which is the Armed Forces Covenant. Sorry, carry on. Yes.
Good morning, councillors. As you know, Perth Kinross Council has a long tradition of supporting the armed forces. The report sets out a range of actions over the last year which demonstrate how the council has fulfilled its commitments under the Armed Forces Covenant. The report outlines the infrastructure which is now in place to ensure that the council's covenant commitments continue to be fulfilled, led by the council's Armed Forces and Veterans Champion and supported by officers across all council services. The council continues to undertake a range of civic duties as well as delivering key information and support for veterans and their families. This information is summarised on a dedicated page on the council's website and promoted through the Veterans First Guide information booklet. It's also shared and developed through the Covenant Partnership Group, which is jointly chaired by the Council's Armed Forces and Veterans Champion. As an employer, we have for many years had supportive policies in place for staff who may be reservists or cadet force adult volunteers. And yesterday, if you were in the building, you may well have noticed that we ran an event at Puller House with members of 7 Scots Reserve Forces to promote the reservists and cadet force adult volunteering opportunities to our staff. Regular dialogue continues with local veteran organisations, and this year plans are nearing fruition for a dedicated war memorial for the area, which has long been advocated for by our veterans organisations. So we are very proud to have the Silver Award in the Armed Forces Employer Recognition Scheme and are pleased to advise members of our intention to go for the Gold Award in the coming months. I'm joined today by David McPhee, who fills the lead officer responsibilities in this area, and if you have any questions, we will both be happy to answer. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any questions at this point? Councillor Parrott, questions?
Can I just ask, where is the site that's been identified for the War Memorial? Where particularly adjacent to the Kirk?
Mrs. Renton.
I'm going to try and explain this. So if we're on St John's Street, and it's the part of the wall where there's currently a bench. It's not actually on the wall, it'll be offset from the church. So if you're walking down St John's Street on the right-hand side, it's just at the wall, the gable end of the kirk there.
Okay, I think I get it. Thanks.
I move the report. This report provides members with an annual progress report in relation to the Council's commitment under the Armed Forces Covenant. I commend this report to members and note the positive work undertaken to help to support the Armed Forces veterans and their families living in Perth Kinross, as well as our duties as an employer to support employees who are reservist and cadet force adult volunteers. I would particularly like to thank my colleague, Councillor Hearn, for his dedication to this role as our Armed Forces and Veterans Champion, and also the Provost for his leadership in terms of a range of civic duties undertaken to demonstrate our commitment to the Armed Forces. Happy to move the report. Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Convener. As the father of 2 sons who both saw service in the Armed Forces, I very much welcome this continuation of the Council's strong tradition of commitment to the Armed Forces and its veterans, and have much pleasure in seconding the report.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any comments? Councillor Parrott.
Convener, thank you. I want to give credit where credit is due. Councillor Hearn has been very assiduous in performing his duties as Armed Forces Champion, and one area of his work I feel is underreported and that's the work he does with the service charities to assist veterans who have difficulties or complex needs. And I think that's probably possibly the most valuable area of his work, and he certainly puts his mind to it, and I think he needs the credit for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. These comments are very welcome. Any other comments? No? Well, thank you. I'm happy to move the paper. Agreed? Agreed. Good. Now, briefly before we end, the Chief Executive would like to say a few words regarding the Health and Social Care Partnership.
Thank you, Convener. Councillors, we heard earlier this morning about the projected overspend in the Health and Social Care Partnership, and I thought it might be helpful just to give you a counterbalance in terms of the information about the performance of the Health and Social Care Partnership. So last week, representatives from the Scottish Government Integration Division had their annual review meeting with the senior team of the Health and Social Care Partnership, which was also attended by myself, the Chief Executive of NHS Tayside, the Chair and the Vice Chair of the IJB. So in contrast to recent joint inspection findings of the Health and Social Care Partnership, colleagues from Scottish Government commended the Health and Social Care Partnership for outperforming many other areas in Scotland across a number of national indicators and indeed outcome measures. They advised that they had reviewed data and had been surprised and indeed impressed by our level of performance. The discussion recognised that the joint inspection had raised legitimate concerns about the processes and arrangements that the Health and Social Care Partnership has in place for performance reporting and strategic planning, whereas the actual performance of the Health and Social Care Partnership in delivering services and improved outcomes for our residents was better than the Scottish average across most indicators and reflected continued improvement from previous years. So I hope that is helpful and gives a context for members.
Thank you very much. I think, again, that's a very welcome statement, given the complexities that we are aware of in the Health and Social Care Partnership. Okay, thank you all very much for your attendance this morning and for your patience throughout.